George St. Pierre, Alexander Volkanovski, Tyson Fury. What do these three men all have in common? They're at the top of their game and they're clean shaved, and you could be too with Manscaped. The MMA Sucker podcast is happy to announce that we are now sponsored by Manscaped, and you can get a massive 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code SUCKER at checkout. Now, a little bit about Manscaped. Manscaped is the best in men's below the waist grooming, offering precision engineering tools for your family jewels. With Valentine's Day just around the corner, there's no better time to invest in the all-new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, designed to elevate your grooming game. As part of the Performance Package, we have the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, which I've been lucky enough to get my hands on, and it is a quality bit of kit. Quality bit of kit. The electric trimmer features skin-safe technology, making it harder for you to nick yourself than it would be to land on prime Anderson Silver. It also comes with their brightest ever LED spotlight yet. It's brighter than the lights of the UFC. I mean, come on, guys, check this out. Got that? Look at that bright light. Brighter than the lights of the UFC, I'm telling you. On top of that, it's also waterproof, making shower shaves an absolute breeze. But that's not everything. This package also features the Weed Whacker 2.0 nose hair trimmer, Manscaped's liquid formulations, and two free goodies. The Shed travel bag, which I've been, again, lucky enough to get my hands on, and Boxers 2.0, because let's be honest, guys, comfort is king. And for those of you that want the sculptured Roy Nelson-esque beard, Manscaped brings you the Beard Hedge Pro Kit, designed to shape your scruff effortlessly. It sculpts the cheek lines and maintains the beard style to give you the suave look for every single occasion, especially those romantic occasions with Valentine's Day coming up. Join 10 million, let that sink in, 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com to bag 20% off with the code SUCKER. Is that enough? No? Throw in free worldwide shipping. Like I said, head over to Manscaped. Head over to manscaped.com. Use the code SUCKER, that's SUCKA at checkout for 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Thank me later. Your balls will thank you. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to the MMA Sucker podcast. As always, I'm Frazer Krohn, and UFC 298 is now one for the books. Live from Anaheim, California, we had a phenomenal fight night. Well, sorry, a phenomenal fight night of fights. It was a pay-per-view event, of course. How this one's going to go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down UFC 298 from top to bottom, and I'm going to touch on the UFC 300 main event because we also got that post fight as well from Dana White, post fight night, sorry, from Dana White, and then I'm going to record an extra show this week, looking ahead to this weekend's action. As always, and as you know, I don't like to do an awful lot of previews, but we've got a really good UFC fight night card live from Mexico City. We've got a really big KSW card, and of course, we've got the PFL versus Bellator card as well as the Cage Warriors and an LFA fight nights sort of sprinkled in there as well. So it'd be too much to put into one podcast. So I'm going to break up into two this week just because I've got the time on my hands. UFC 298 main event then. Going into the fight, I saw it very, very close. I did see Alexander Volkanovski winning. I thought he had the higher level experience over Ilia Topuria. As we now know, the finish came at the hands of Ilia Topuria, defeated Alexander Volkanovski by knockout punches. Round 2, 3 minutes 32 of round 2, to become the new UFC featherweight champion. He's the first man to ever beat Alexander Volkanovski down at featherweight, and he looked good doing it. He surprised me a lot. We knew that he had a lot of power, but it was the caliber of guy that he was knocking out before. You know, you've got the knockout of Ryan Hall, you've got the knockout of you got the submission of Bryce Mitchell after sort of piecing him up. You've got the knockout of Jai Herbert. Damon Jackson's obviously been knocked out at the hands of Ilia Topuria. but these aren't the elite guys in the division. Alexander Volkanovski is arguably the best featherweight we've ever seen in the UFC, and he knocked him out in pretty much one shot. Obviously, the right hook came um, after a flurry from Topuria in that second round, but he was doing well in the fight prior to that. John Anik said on the broadcast on all three scorecards, Volkanovski had won the first round. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. Of course, it doesn't. But I think it's interesting to look at those scorecards after, if Volkanovski was finished in the fifth round, but because he was finished in the second, it doesn't really matter if he won the first. Um, Although saying that, I think the first was a very close bout. Let me just pull up the stats just quickly. I do think that the first round was tight. Was a close round. Yeah, the first round, Ilia Topuria landed 16 total strikes. Volkanovski landed 26. Most of them, as Joe Rogan and Bisping were sort of saying on the broadcast, were the majority of those were kicks that Volkanovski was landing. Very, very kick heavy performance from Volkanovski in the first round. He was working the inside and the outside leg kicks. He was working the body, and he was going up high and constantly keeping Topuria's guard quite high, which is against a boxer, it's a really good tactic to try and keep the guard high, throw the high kicks constantly, and keep the hands up, keep the hands up, keep the hands up. And then in the second round, he got more into the sort of boxing range with Ilia Topuria, which led him to unfortunately being knocked out. He was piecing Topuria up in that second round. He was winning the second round, in my opinion, as well as obviously winning the first round. It swayed away a little bit from the leg kicks. Obviously, leg kicks we're going to go on to talk about became a real factor in another fight of the. Leg kicks throughout to be honest, throughout a lot of the fights on this card were a big aspect. And Joe Rogan sort of, was saying that they're as important as the jab. I get what you're saying. I'd argue in some aspects they're more important than the jab, because we very rarely see a fight finished by someone getting jabbed essentially, and more often than not more often than not, but very, very regularly these days we're seeing people stopped by leg kicks, or at least highly compromised by leg kicks, which leads to the stoppage. But going back to the main event, yeah, Topuria was eating up the leg of the lead leg of Volkanovski in the first round. Volkanovski kind of retaliated with some of his own low leg kicks, some of his own calf kicks, and then he kind of went away from that in the second round. He's piecing him up with a jab. Topuria's nose was bust open due to the jabs of Volkanovski, but Topuria, he waited, he was patient, he was making the reads on Volkanovski, and he eventually made him pay. He knocked out Volkanovski with one punch. Like I said, there was a flurry, but it was the one punch that landed that knocked him out cold, and he was down for a long time. I don't like Joe Rogan interviewing him. I don't know why he did a post-fight press conference. Volkanovski, it's not necessary in my opinion. Let the guy just gather himself. It's a devastating loss for Volkanovski. He's 1-3 now. Taking into account that this is the pound for pound number one guy, probably, well, this time last year he was the pound for pound number one. Taking into account that he was undefeated at featherweight, I think he was 12 straight in the UFC. He dominated Max Holloway, he dominated Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega, Chan Sung Young, and now he's 1-3. It's a brutal game, MMA. But what like I say, I think Topuria was really making the reads in that second round. Although he wasn't, there wasn't an awful lot of output from Topuria in the second round. Visually, anyway, I think mentally there was a lot of output for Topuria. If I throw this, what's happening here? And that's what a high level boxer Topuria is. What I would say is that, well, I've got two aspects. Joe Rogan really began to do my head in, to be honest, in that main event. He was, at one moment he's saying, "Oh, look at how good Volkanovski is backing out on the angles, always keeping away, as it were, from the returns of Ilia Topuria, or the potential return of Ilia Topuria." And then he'd switch up what he was saying and say, "I don't like the fact that that Volkanovski is backing up with his chin in the air." If you've ever seen Volkanovski fight, he does it a lot, but he's got one hand, yes, only fingers, but he's constantly looking and moving his head either side, and he got a little bit frustrating for me. But obviously, Ilia Topuria made that read, crowded him against the fence, and made Volkanovski pay to the body. Um, sorry, I thought he would make Volkanovski pay to the body in that situation, but he went upstairs and it paid dividends. He's now the UFC featherweight champion. What happens next? I don't think we get a UFC in Spain. Unfortunately for Ilia Topuria, it's kind of what he called for with his post-fight speech. I don't think we get the rematch either because it was pretty decisive. Unfortunately for Volkanovski, it was pretty decisive. We've also got a big fight between Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega next weekend. I think the UFC is going to go down the route of either giving Brian Ortega or Yair Rodriguez the shot next, and I don't think it'll be in Spain. The UFC hasn't. I think it's only planning to go to England, into London, into Manchester once this year. We've had two UFC cards in London last year. I don't think they're looking at coming. France will probably be in September again in Paris, but there's not an awful lot of international shows, European shows, I should say, scheduled for this year. They want to go back. Rumors of them going back to Dublin. That'll be later on in the summer, potentially headlined by someone else that was on this card. We'll talk about that later, but you've got to look down the rankings now. So you'll have everyone will shift down one. Ilia Topuria will go up to be champion. Alexander Volkanovski will be the number one contender. Number two will be Max Holloway, but obviously he's doing his thing up at lightweight at UFC 300 for the BMF title. Yair Rodriguez is in there against Brian Ortega next week. We've got Movsar Evelev, who's also undefeated. You could, if you want to really sell an undefeated versus undefeated, you could have Topuria versus Evelev, and I think that would be a phenomenal fight. But the sky's the limit now for Ilia Topuria. Like I said, he's undefeated. I think he's 15-0 now. And he's picking up some huge wins. He's a finisher. He got a unanimous decision in his UFC debut. Then he knocked out Damon Jackson, knocked out Ryan Hall, knocked out Jai Herbert up at lightweight, submitted Bryce Mitchell. Fight of the night, domination over Josh Emmett across 5 rounds, and now he's knocked out the the number two, pound for pound guy, arguably the best featherweight we've ever seen in Alexander Volkanovski. Like I said, going into the bout, I was surprised. Going into the bout, I believe that the sheer caliber of opponent that Alexander Volkanovski has faced in his career, Islam Makhachev twice, Max Holloway 3 times, Yair Rodriguez, Chan Sung Jung, Brian Ortega. Before he's even champion, you got the likes of Chad Mendes in there. I thought that would probably get him through. And unfortunately, on this occasion for Volkanovski, it didn't. It's a very tough loss to take for Volkanovski. But let's not take anything away from Ilia Topuria. I thought it was a phenomenal performance. And like I said, the sky's the limit. 15-0. He gets it. He gets the game now. And it was a statement win. Moving on to the very fun co-main event, which I thought was unlucky not to get fight of the night. Robert Whittaker defeats Paulo Costa via unanimous decision. The official scorecards were 29-28, 29-28, and 30-27. This was a really interesting fight for me because what was Robert Whittaker going to look like having come off the sort of loss, the loss to Dricus du Plessis by finish, and he didn't look great. He looked a little bit slow. What was Costa going to look like? He's been out for a year and a half after defeating Luke Rockhold via decision. He was very, very tight. He wasn't very good in that fight. Rockhold was just worse. I thought Whittaker looked really good, really quick, really vicious early, and that's exactly what he needed to be against Paulo Costa. He was working, for me, Robert Whittaker was working really well in all aspects of the game. He was always first and he was always last. He was always going with the jab, and in the little exchanges, he'd always land last. The jab was working really well, and that's something I think he must have read my keys to victory for him, because the jab was working phenomenally for Robert Whittaker. He was landing the jab over and over again, and he was doing different things with the jab. He was jabbing and then coming over with the left hook a lot in this fight, and it worked really well. It's something you did against Marvin Vettori, and it's something that landed a lot against Paulo Costa. I'm fascinated to go back and watch this fight and really break down Robert Whittaker's sort of attacks in this fight off the jab. but Whittaker was working, especially in the first round, and to a degree in the second round. He definitely slowed down in that third, but in the first round, he was working really well in the half spaces. And what I mean by that is he was either all the way out of range, all the way in, or arguably too far in range and stuff like sort of stifling his worker slightly, or he was also working really well in that range where Costa could land on him, but he could also land on Costa. And what I really thought would have been beneficial for Whittaker in this fight is because every time that he landed a power jab off the left hand, he kind of that he stepped quite far forward. He was right in range of Paulo Costa, and he wasn't able to actually put too much behind. Well, not every time, but especially in the first round, he landed that hard jab, and then he wasn't able to put a right hand behind it. The second round, he definitely took a step back and was able to land the jab with the right hand behind it, or the jab with the left hook. Sorry, he was able to left sort of overhand off the jab. Sort of throw the jab, land the jab, and then come round again with the left overhand. But he was kind of stifling his own work at times when he was landing the jab and almost he's almost too close to Costa. What I think would have been really beneficial for him is if he would have dummied the jab and come up with an upward elbow, because that would have definitely put Costa open, because he was landing the jab all night long. I don't think Costa defended many jabs at all. And if he did, he defended them with his face, which isn't the arguably not the most proficient way to defend shots. Costa was outlanded in every single round. 38-27 in the first round, 32-26 in the second round, and 25-14 in that third round. But Costa has the equalizer. He landed that phenomenal spinning heel kick at the end of the first round. I've got no idea how Whittaker stayed on his feet, and I think Whittaker was very lucky that that was at the very end of the round and not sort of with 2 minutes or even with a minute or even 30 seconds to spare, because he may have been knocked out in that one if Costa was allowed to really unload and sort of look for the finish in that one. The jab of Costa was on point in this fight as well, I feel, but he never put too much behind the jab itself. It would mostly be one jab or one overhand, or his jab was on point in spite of the calf kicks of Whittaker that I thought that worked really well, and the calf kicks of Costa worked really well on Whittaker as well. For me, Costa's lucky that he has a lot of power, because he has in my opinion, he has very little octagon IQ. What I mean by that is there was times in the first round, I think there's times in the second there's times in the second round, I think there's times in the third round, or definitely times in the third round, where he was constantly calling Whittaker to throw down with him. But but Whittaker was smarter than that. He's not going to stand in the pocket and swing away with Costa, because he knows that the power that Costa had. Costa's got himself into a position where he's fighting these top level guys. And I thought it was pretty straightforward. I personally scored it 29-28 in favor of Whittaker. He obviously got the second and the third. That first round, it could have, if you scored it 30-27, I'm all for it. The closest the fight came to a finish was that spinning heel kick, which is why I gave the first round to Costa. But don't get it twisted. I think for 4 minutes and 50 seconds, Costa was losing the first round before he wasn't, as it were. But he's very lucky he's got power, because the fight IQ on the side of Paulo Costa for me just isn't really there. I don't think he's not a very smart fighter. And I don't know what's next. I know what I want next for Robert Whittaker. I don't know what's next for Paulo Costa. Do you go with Jared Cannonier? But Cannonier, there's no benefit for Cannonier to take that fight. Do you go for someone like a Jack Hermansson against Paulo Costa? Jack Hermansson's obviously coming off the big win last time out against Joe Pfeiffer. Or do you lean into someone like that grudge match with Hamzat Chimaev next? Like I say, I'm not really sure where Costa goes from here, but I know that next for Robert Whittaker, I want him to face Sean Strickland, and I think he dominates Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland is a volume striker, as we know. He's not a power puncher. He's got a wicked, wicked jab, which could definitely cause Robert Whittaker problems. But Whittaker's got a wicked jab as well. I think Whittaker's slightly more well-rounded, mixing in the wrestling and could mix in the wrestling a lot more. And I just think Whittaker's got more strings to his bow than Sean Strickland. I think that's the fight to make next, without a doubt. Strickland may want to come back sooner than Robert Whittaker will be able to, but if not, for me, like I say, that is without a doubt the fight to make. Moving on, Ian Gary defeats Jeff Neal via split decision 30-27, 30-27, and then 29-28 the other way. I don't know about this fight. I found this fight very boring. I don't think we learned anything about Ian Gary. I don't think we learned anything about Jeff Neal. We knew that Jeff Neal, if he doesn't land the big shots, he can let fights get away from him, like we saw against Neil Magny. I think we also kind of saw that against Shavkat, although Shavkat is, finished Jeff Neal. And Ian Gary, we knew that he was a long, rangy striker with, he's tall, so he does well in the clinch. But I don't think we learned an awful lot about either man. I think Joe Rogan was really trying to big up Ian Gary, and Ian Gary's good. He's very good. There's no doubting that. But in my notes, I've written, as a fighter, he's very average, in my opinion. As an overall package, the mic work, the social media work, the fact that people really seem to dislike Ian Gary is what makes him quite a decent fighter. Now, if he was just vanilla, if he just came in, even Movsar Evilo, for example, I think they've got a similar record. I think Ian Gary is, I think 16-0 now, maybe. Movsar Evilo is 17-0 or 19-0. So Movsar Evilo is, 18-0, and Ian Gary is. Let me just double check what his record is now after last night. Is 14-0. Now, Movsar Evilo is very vanilla. He doesn't get on the mic. He doesn't talk shit. He doesn't make all these crazy claims, whereas Ian Gary does. So as fighters, I think pound for pound, Movsar Evilo is the better fighter. As an overall package of what the UFC want, Ian Gary is the better guy, as it were. Like I said, I think he really needs to lean into this heel persona. And now, if he faces Colby Covington next, which is what he called for, I don't know who the crowd will hate more. I think some of the crowd like Colby, some of the crowd, especially after the Leon Edwards stuff, don't like Colby. Everybody seemed to be booing Ian Gary, and I saw a tweet. I have no idea who it's from, and I apologize, but they said that they go to a lot of UFC events, and some of the booing for Ian Gary was the loudest they'd ever heard. And that's because he's got a personality and a persona that's very easy not to like, with the greatest of respect to him. He has got all the stuff with his wife. I don't have a problem with him having his wife and his child around during fight week, but she is not the star. Stop showing her on all the embedded series. I think 2 or 3 of the episodes this week opened with her. Yes, she's there. Have her in the background. I'm sure Volkanovski's children were there. They weren't in every single shot of embedded. They gave her a special seat at ringside. I think it's weird for me. I've never seen a partner, whether it be a wife or a husband, have this much sort of media attention. I know Layla Anna Lee or Layla Machado Garrett or whatever her name, Layla, Ian Gary's wife. I know she used to do a lot of work for the UFC, and maybe she is getting this sort of special treatment. But before the fight, they were showing her in a special little seat, not quite in the crowd, sort of in front of the crowd, cage side. After the fight, they cut, after he was announced the winner, they cut straight to Layla Anna Lee, and it's weird. It's weird for me. I do find it strange. I wish they'd just stop showing her on screen because, if she wants to be that much on screen, maybe she should try and get a job back with the UFC. But I just don't understand it for now. But like I said, we didn't learn anything about Ian Gary. I think as a fighter, I think as a heel, we certainly learned about Ian Gary, and he really needs to lean into that. And if I'm Sean Brady, I'm calling out Ian Gary. I'm making all of the moves to try and get an Ian Gary fight, because at the end of the day, I think Sean Brady beats him. I think Sean Brady wrestles him. I think Sean Brady's more than capable on the feet. I think he beats him. And if with a win, I know that would mean Sean Brady fighting down the division, but with a win, he he takes all the hype away from him. But yeah, like I said, as a fighter, I don't think we learned anything about Ian Gary. I'm glad to see him back in the octagon because it is exciting. He is an undefeated prospect, and I'm glad to see him back in the octagon after his health troubles during UFC 296. It's just a shame that he had to come in with probably the most lackluster performance of his UFC career and certainly of the main card. Um, because that fight came after Merab Dvalishvili dominated Henry Cejudo. Non-stop pressure from Merab Dvalishvili. He lost that first round, and that seemed to kind of wake him up a little bit. And he wasn't as wrestle heavy as we've come to expect with Merab, but I think he was aware what he was in there with. I say he wasn't as wrestle heavy. He attempted 11 takedowns and he landed 5, which for anybody else I think on the entire card, apart from maybe Anthony Hernandez, is the most attempted takedowns in a fight. But this is Merab. He usually attempts a lot more strikes. A lot more takedowns. He attempted 273 strikes, landing 176. That first round, he was cracked by Henry Cejudo, but we've seen him cracked and almost pretty much knocked out by Marlon Moraes before. I don't think that's water off a duck's back for someone like Merab. But he was showboating in there essentially in that second round and in the third round. He carried Henry Cejudo across the cage to dump him in front of Mark Zuckerberg. I think that was in the third round. In the second round, he had him in that strange sort of guillotine choke, and he was talking to Mark Zuckerberg outside the octagon. Merab is in there with a 2-time simultaneous former UFC world champion, Olympic gold medalist, one of the best guys we've arguably ever seen in the UFC, in Henry Cejudo. And Merab's carrying him about. He's showboating. He's talking to people outside. He's dominating Henry Cejudo for the final 2 rounds. He's got 10 wins in a row now, and he is, in my opinion, the best bantamweight on the planet, bar none. I know he doesn't hold the belt. I know Sean O'Malley holds the belt, but Sean O'Malley, without a doubt, watched that performance from Merab and wasn't happy in a way that he competes in the same division as Merab, because Merab is without a doubt the most dominant fighter in the bantamweight division and will and has to get the UFC bantamweight title shot, regardless of whether it's Sean O'Malley or Chito Vera that wins at UFC 299 next month. He has to get the next title shot. He's got 10 wins in a row now. Yeah, they're by decision, but they're not boring decisions, Merab. He's such a good character. He's leaning into the social media world. It's just a phenomenal performance, all fight week, really, and all in the build up to this fight. Before the fight, Henry said, I wanted 5 rounds. Merab called for 10 rounds after the fight. I think Henry is very happy that it wasn't a 5-round fight, because he would have just continued to take a beating in that one. He looked out of ideas after Merab had sort of carried him across the cage and embarrassed him a little bit. But a really, really dominant performance. As was Anthony Hernandez's performance opening up the main card. I thought it was a really good performance. Anthony Hernandez is quickly becoming one of my favorite fighters to watch. Got 5 straight wins now, which was started with that win over Rodolfo Vieira. Got a unanimous decision victory over Josh Fremd, a submission victory over Marc-Andre Barrio, a TKO victory over Edmund Shabazian, and now a rear naked choke, performance of the night winning rear naked choke against Roman Kopylov. Kopylov, phenomenal takedown defense, as we know. I think the stats showed that he defended something crazy like 20 takedowns in a row, which I'm just looking now. I'm not quite sure where those takedowns have come from. Maybe the Albert Duraev fight. Albert Duraev landed 1 takedown in the second round of their fight, and then attempted 5 after that. I'm not really sure where that stat comes from, but regardless, he was taken down by Anthony Hernandez, who, I'll be honest, isn't the best wrestler in the UFC, and I think he'll be the first to admit that, but he's one of the most relentless wrestlers in the UFC. Did he get the first takedown? No. Did he get the second? No. Did he get the third? No. Did he get the fourth? Probably not. I just want to look at when he wasn't accredited with every takedown that I thought he maybe got, but in that first round, he landed 1 of 11 takedowns. And that didn't deter him at all. because in the second round he came out and he's still searching for the takedowns. He's got a great chin, Anthony Hernandez, because some of the shots that he was taking from Kopylov were heavy shots, but he was just really relentless. And I thought it was a really elite performance. He did exactly what he needs to do, and he did it well, which is the most important thing. And for me, one of the most gangster things that happened at the event, we've got knockouts, we've got Costa sticking his tongue out. Anthony Hernandez, when he locked in the rear naked choke, he smiled and nodded his head. It reminded me of Nate Diaz flipping the bird when he locked in the triangle choke back in the day. It was a really, really well-rounded performance from Anthony Hernandez. Looking at the prelims, I'm just going to pick out a couple. Kicking off the card, Miranda Maverick looked really good. A distance management, knowing when to wrestle and when to strike looked really good. Is Angela Lee now going to be cut from the UFC? She's, I think, on a 4-fight skid. She's definitely going to be out of the rankings. Yeah, she's on a 4-fight skid and she's 2-7 in her last 9. I think she's probably gone from the UFC. Oban Elliott put in a really good performance. Crazy start to the fight when he landed that head kick, and then Val Woodburn, just unloaded, and it was difficult to know how good Woodburn was. He was really tough. He was in a lot of difficult positions because Oban Elliott showed a really mauling grappling game. It was really impressive showing, but Woodburn just didn't have the cardio. He's, as we know, a heavily muscled guy, and he just didn't have the cardio to sort of go with the toughness. But Oban Elliott could be a potential star. He knows how to work the mic. He's a fun personality. He's out of that Shaw MMA in Wales, and it was a good performance. I thought Barlow looked good, as did Zhang. Both of those very accurate, heavy hands. Zhang stayed in the pocket and knocked out his opponent. Barlow, horrible finish. I thought he was unlucky not to get a performance of the night bonus for his victory. Junior Taffa, it's a shame because it's a really good story. As we know, Justin Taffa, Junior's older brother, was scheduled to face Marco Rodriguez de Lima. He suffered a knee injury. Justin Taffa stepped in on a day's notice, but he was just brutalized by the leg kicks. And I love the leg kick, as everybody knows. I've been sort of banging on about it all episode, really, but I've always loved the leg kick. And it's arguably a good job that Justin Taffa didn't go in there, because if De Lima would have attacked the legs of Justin Taffa like he did Junior Taffa, and there was a slight knee injury, that could have been a massive issue for Junior Taffa, for Justin Taffa, sorry. Junior Taffa is scheduled to fight again at the end of March. If that'll actually go ahead, I'm not sure. That was a bad injury. It was a bad injury. He just couldn't take any more. Leg kicks, and like I said, it was a bad injury for Junior Taffa. But it wasn't the fairy tale sort of ending to the fight that we maybe hoped for after him stepping in on short notice. But these things happen. Props to De Lima. It was a really good performance. And the fight of the night, as per Dana White, was Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Lemos. I expected and put on my betting piece that Dern would be knocked out in this one. She almost was in that second round. She got a really bad eye injury in that second round. I thought she was awful on the feet. I know it appeared as if she dropped Amanda Lemos in this, I think, second or third round. She didn't. I think Amanda Lemos was just off balance. When Dern landed the shot, her stand-up is still pretty atrocious. She doesn't take a shot well. I'm not saying that I expect her to be like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson or like, some of these top guys, Robert Whittaker, when he took a fair few shots last night. But there was points where she was almost running away from Amanda Lemos. Now, we know Amanda Lemos has got a lot of power. But Mackenzie Dern, she does, like I say, she doesn't take a shot well. She's tough though. She's tough, but she visibly, apart from the leg kick, which I thought Amanda Lemos was maybe slightly disheartened by because she was landing a pretty heavy leg kick and it Dern was kind of, brushing it off as nothing. I don't think that she takes a shot to the head very well. It's very clear and obvious when she's in pain or when a shot affects her. Her head bounces all the way back. And I did read somewhere that she's training back with Jason Perillo, which I think is the right move. But he wasn't in her corner this past weekend. I think the takedown that Mackenzie Dern landed in the first round was the best takedown of her career. I honestly do. She timed it really well, snatched her legs, and got Amanda Lemos to the ground. And she was dominating Amanda Lemos on the ground in that first round. Second round didn't really go her way. And that third round was instantly forgettable, I'd call it. Amanda Lemos decided to take the fight to the floor. But Mackenzie Dern, she's got amazing heart, but she simply doesn't have a well-rounded game. When's the last time we saw her really try and mix in the wrestling with some striking? When's the last time we saw her throw kicks? Just a kick. I couldn't tell you. And it was a little bit, disappointing, but I'm not surprised. I thought she showed real toughness. And that's the thing with Mackenzie Dern. She lost 2 on the bounce now. But they're to Amanda Lemos and Jessica Andrade. I'm excited to see Mackenzie Dern fight again because I don't think she's very old, Mackenzie Dern. Let me just double check how old she is. But yeah, look, she's 29. She's 30. Sorry, I think. Let me just double check. Yeah, she's 30 years old. She'll be 31 next month. She's still got room to grow in what is it's a competitive division at flyweight without a doubt. She's still got room to grow. Sorry, at strawweight, she's still got room to grow, and you've got girls down the rankings now that she could definitely face and have competitive fights with. Lupi Godinez, a wrestling heavy girl, would she look to take Mackenzie Dern down? I doubt it. Tabitha Ricci, again, competitive fight. Angela Hill, don't really want to see that fight. I think they've already fought. Angela Hill and they've already fought in the main event. Don't want to see that again. Karolina Kovacevic, even Michelle Waterson Gomez, Gillian Robertson. There's plenty of girls in and around the top 15 that Mackenzie Dern can fight, and they'll be entertaining fights. That was fight of the night. Like I said, I'm surprised that Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa didn't get a fight of the night, but it is what it is. I think Mackenzie Dern's fight was a fun fight, and props to Amanda Lemos. She bounces back from the disappointing loss to Zhang Weili, and I want to see her probably in a rematch with Jessica Andrade next, or depending on the outcome of the UFC 300 co-main event, potentially facing Yang Xiaonan if Yang Xiaonan loses. But that moves me on nicely to UFC 300. We got the main event announcement of Alex Pereira versus Jamala Hill for the UFC light heavyweight title. This, for me, is a massive disappointment. I'll be honest. Massive disappointment. UFC 300, supposedly the biggest fight card in UFC history. And you've got Alex Pereira, who's a mega star, and Jamala Hill, who for me isn't a megastar. Now, no disrespect to Jamala Hill, I think he's a good fighter. He's obviously, the form. He's never lost the belt. He beat Glover Teixeira for the belt. But he's not a guy that people are going to get behind for a UFC 300 main event. It's quite simple, and like I said, it is a letdown. It is disappointing. It is not a fight that, for me, the UFC 300 main event should have been a fight that really has fans going crazy. It should be a fight that is too big to play or it should, in theory, it should be a fight that's too big to play co-headliner to any other fight. It should be able to stand up a pay-per-view on its own. And it's just disappointing. I tweeted earlier, on UFC 200, we were teased McGregor. We were teased a Conor McGregor comeback versus Michael Chandler. Aspinall versus Pereira, heavyweight was teased. It was hinted at. We got maybe even a Nate Diaz return or even a Khabib return was spoken about a lot this week. I didn't think that was ever going to happen, and we got Jamal Hill versus Alex Pereira, which unfortunately we know was not the UFC's go-to. It wasn't the UFC's first choice. Leon Edwards supposedly accepted 3 different opponents, and nobody was able to make the fight with Leon Edwards. Disappointment. And no, I'm not saying that a Leon Edwards headline in UFC 300 would have been exactly what we ordered, but I think that regardless of who we fought, it would have been a more competitive matchup than this, because I don't think Jamal Hill is fit to lace the boots of Alex Pereira. He's good. Jamal Hill is very good, but Alex Pereira is elite, and Jamal Hill, in my opinion, is not. UFC 200, we had the return of Brock Lesnar. We had a huge grudge match between Daniel Cormier and John Jones before it was cancelled. We had the kind of return of Cain Velasquez, I guess. We had Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo competing for the interim title. We had the Misha Tate, who had quickly become a very, very big star. Obviously, ended up headlining the bout. And for UFC 300, we've got no returning stars, a lackluster main event, an exciting co-main event and BMF title bout, a cracking lightweight bout, but in my opinion, it's underwhelming. It's really, really disappointing. Who would I have put? I would have tried to get Alex Pereira and see if he was willing to move up to heavyweight to compete against Tom Aspinall for the interim heavyweight title. I would have seen if Dricus du Plessis could have made the turnaround against Israel Adesanya, would have sold better, in my opinion, and would have been more intriguing. I would have even. I think there's other avenues I would have gone. I'm just trying to have a look. Obviously, John Jones wasn't available. Stipe Miocic versus Tom Aspinall. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. Like I said, Dricus versus Israel Adesanya. I mean, would you even consider a quick turnaround for Topuria? I know it's only 2 months' time, but Volkanovski was talking about it. Topuria, if let's say Yair Rodriguez takes no damage next week, or Brian Ortega takes no damage next week, Topuria versus one of those guys would have been even bigger. You look at UFC 299, in my opinion, is a better card, or at least there's maybe not a better card. There's a lot of very good fights on that card. You've got Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Vera headlining the bout. Okay. You've got Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis in a 5-round co-main event. You've got the UFC debut of Michael Page taking on Kevin Holland. You've got Gilbert Burns and Jack Della Maddalena in a welterweight, what could be a welterweight title eliminator. Jack Della Maddalena undefeated in the UFC. Gilbert Burns, yes, he's coming off the loss to Bilal Muhammad, but before that, he looked really, really good. You've got Petr Yan returning to see if he's still got it against a young up-and-comer in Song Yadong. You've got Jayton Almeida versus Curtis Blades. You've got Caitlin Chikagian or Kremania, Caitlin Chikagian, apologies for butchering her name, against Macy Barber. You've got Mateus Gamrot versus RDA. You've got Pedro Munoz versus Kyler Phillips. Michelle Pereira's on the card. Joanne Woods on the card. So, and you've got the debut again. I cannot pronounce his name. Robelius Despinige. Anyway, he's got 3 fights that are finished in under 15 seconds, all knockouts. That's all you need to know. 12-second knockout, 3-second knockout, 4-second knockout. He's facing Josh Partisan at UFC 299. So that's being finished early, straight up. But what the point I'm trying to make is that UFC 300 should have been a standout event that is like no other. And the headline of that standout event is just a very same old headliner that could have headlined UFC 301 the month after in Brazil. Would have probably made a lot more sense with Alex Pereira being Brazilian. They're going to try and pitch it, in my opinion, as Alex Pereira looking to avenge Glover Teixeira's loss to Jamal Hill, but they went life and death. Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira went, Glover Teixeira went life and death back. I think that was in Singapore. in Glover Teixeira's last ever fight. No, sorry, it was in Rio de Janeiro. They went life and death, fight of the night. But 50-44, 50-44, and 50-44, all in Jamal Hill's favor. But he didn't. It wasn't an easy fight for Jamal Hill. They're going to try and pitch this as Pereira's going to avenge the loss of Glover Teixeira, beat Jamal Hill. But Jamal Hill, he's legit. I don't think he's anywhere near the level of an Alex Pereira. If you look at the guys that he's fought and beaten, he's on a 4-fight winning streak. Jimmy Crute, who, respect to Jimmy Crute, but he's somewhat fallen off in recent times. He's 1 draw and 3 losses in his last 4 fights. Sorry. Johnny Walker KO'd. Well, that happens. Thiago Santos. I mean, where's Thiago Santos now? He's 1 win, 5 losses, and a no contest in the PFL, and he'll compete against Yoel Romero this upcoming weekend, and then Glover Teixeira, who, at the time I think was 43 years old. It's not, like I said, I'm rambling on a little bit, but it's just not a UFC 300 main event in my opinion. I'm really disappointed, but here's what it is. They had to get it booked. We're getting closer now. What, 2 months away? Less than 2 months away. It is what it is. But that not take away from UFC 298, which was a phenomenal card. Ilia Topuria is now on top of the world at featherweight, and rightfully so. It's a phenomenal performance, dominant performance in the end, and a brutal knockout. Take that away from this week, and not how disappointing the UFC 300 main event is. Like I said, guys, I will be dropping another podcast later on in the week. It might come out Tuesday or Wednesday, previewing this week, because we've got a really big week to look ahead to. But I didn't want to take anything away from the 298 breakdown. Like and subscribe, guys, all that good stuff. Comment, drop a comment in below, share the video, do whatever you want to do. Use Manscaped, manscaped.com /sucker, manscaped.com /sucker. You get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with our code sucker. Link will be in the description below. Check it out, guys. You take it easy, and I'll speak to you later on in the week.